Okay, so Tom's Hardware has just done a story on how to dual boot a Raspberry Pi. Initially I thought it was an old story, but as I look closer, it's something pretty impressive. Now I've covered Pinn OS and also Berryboot on the Pi in many videos, and they're ways of getting multiple operating systems onto a single SD card or a USB device and booting them in your Pi and being able to switch between them. They are really good systems, really good ways of doing it. I've also done videos on how to install using, say, a Windows computer, a MacBook, a Chromebook, an Android device, an iPhone, so to get you started with a Raspberry Pi. And this kind of combines the whole lot together, because this is a website which allows you to write to a USB stick or an SD card, choose your operating systems, and I reckon you can probably do it on pretty much any device. Now I'm on a Raspberry Pi at the moment, but I reckon I could do it on my iPad. So let's show you how it works. So if we scroll down through this story, Pinn is a website, so if we click on this, and I'll put a link to the Tom's Hardware story where you'll find this link in it. Select your media, so I'm going to say USB drive. Select your USB drive size, so I'm going to say 64 gig because I've got a Samsung bar which is 64 gig. Let's pop that in my Pi. I'm going to plug it into the USB 2 socket because I've already got a USB 3 drive, an SSD drive, which is running Twister OS, and I find two USB 3 drives usually crash the Pi. So it's different if you've got a powered USB hub, but yeah, I've plugged it into USB 2. So let's select 64 gig. And this shows you the models you can install it onto. It's got the new Raspberry Pi Zero 2W there, which is nice to see. So it's going to only show you operating systems that are suitable for that particular Pi. The Compute Module 4 is interesting to see on there as well, because it's quite tricky to write an operating system with Compute Module 4. There's definitely more steps than other devices. I keep meaning to revisit it at some point. Raspberry Pi 4 Model B is what I'm going to use because it's the Pi that I use the most. So let's click on that. And here you can see we've got different tabs at the top here: minimal, games, utility, and so on. So minimal operating systems, so very small. So we've got Arch Linux, Diet Pi, Gen 2 64. I've covered all of these in separate videos if you're interested in seeing what they are. Raspberry Pi OS Lite Bullseye, which is the newest version. If we click on games, so these are multi-emulation systems, so Batocera, Lacquer, we've got 64-bit version of Lacquer there, Recalbox, and also RetroPie. Under utilities, there's ways of creating data partitions, testing, so we've got Debian 64, we've got Raspex, and interestingly a minute ago when I did this, Debian 64 wasn't there, so I think new things are being added all the time. Under general, we've got Gen 2, 64-bit Linux, Kali Linux, we've got Android here as well, look, and all the versions. So Lineage OS 16, 17, 18 and 19, which is Android 12. We've got Manjaro, we've got Raspberry Pi OS Bullseye, which is the version with more software in it. We've got 64-bit Raspberry Pi OS, the beta version, which is still really good. We've got Twister OS, my favourite. We've got Ubuntu and Ubuntu Mate. I think I'm going to go with Ubuntu Mate. And if you click on it, you can see a bit about the system, so it takes you to a website that shows you it. But that's selected now, Ubuntu Mate. Let's go up to the top, and so media, we've got LibreElec, which is Kodi. We've got an Android TV version there as well, Constakang version of Android TV. OSMC, which is another media center. And Volumia, which I don't think was on there before when I was doing this. So yeah, I'm pretty sure this is changing all the time. And this is really nice to see. So we've got Raspberry Pi OS, the old stable version, and there's the light version as well. So we're going to have that light version. Again, this takes you to the website, but you can just click, oh, let's close that down, but you can just click on the symbol and it'll install it. Let's have something else minimal. Let's have 3 in total. So let's go with Arch Linux. You can see how much available space I've got and how much is required to do that installation. So not very much. So let's hit next. And this bit's really cool, and I can't remember seeing this in Pinn OS before, but you can basically choose the partition sizes. So Arch Linux is the last one, is it, that I added? Yeah, so let's put that really small. There you go, so just over 7 gigabytes. And Ubuntu Mate is a 64-bit operating system. I think I'm going to give that a bit more space. Whoops, so if I go this direction, so let's go with maybe 32. Yeah, that's fine. I'm not worried exactly how it is. So let's hit next. So you can see here that you've got to download both of these files. So let's click on that. and you can see 47.7 megabytes is downloading. Let's go back, download recovery command line. So recovery command line's a very small file because that's done already, and pin-light-zip is done already. So copy the contents of the pin directory to your FAT32 formatted media. That's not changed. It's the command line bit that's the new bit. So let's minimize this. Now your drive needs to be formatted as FAT32. Now if you've got a brand new micro SD card, chances are it is FAT32 anyway, especially the 64 gig and the 32 gig ones. I think I haven't found one that hasn't been FAT32, but if you do need to format it, Raspberry Pi Imager is something that works really well for this. So if we go into Raspberry Pi Imager, we can choose OS, we can erase, choose storage, and you can see that's Samsung flash drive, and then just hit right and yes. And this won't take any time at all. There you go, so all done. So if I close this down and open up the drive, so if I click on my 64 gig drive, you'll see there's nothing on it at the moment, it's completely clear. So if I go to downloads, and the pin-light-zip that I downloaded just now, if I right click and extract here, that'll basically unzip it. And then if I open up that new folder, so you can see it says pin-light, and I need to copy all of this, so if I hit Control A, right click and copy, then if I click on the 64 gig drive, right click and paste that in. It looks like it's going to take ages sometimes, but it doesn't take very long at all because it's only 51.8 megabytes. Yeah, so it comes up as 47 minutes on mine. But once it gets past one little bit, it then speeds right up. There you go. Now it says 3 minutes, 30 seconds now. And now we need to replace a file on there. So click on downloads. The bit we also downloaded, recovery.command line, right click and copy, go back to the 64 gig drive, and right click anywhere empty and hit paste. And we need to say replace all. Now this is actually the bit that tells it about the operating systems to install. That's the reason you do that. To be fair, if you didn't put that in, it would just revert to normal Pin OS, and you could pick operating systems and do it in the old way that Pin OS does it, or the alternative way. No one is better than the other. But the website's quite a nice friendly way of searching it and being able to do it on another device as well. So that's all done. So I need to close this down and shut down the system. So I can turn that off, unplug my SSD drive, which Twister OS was running from, and now I'm going to boot up from this USB drive. I'm going to switch it over to a USB 3 socket because it's going to run faster through that, and switch on. And you can see it's detected the drive, it's all starting up. And Pin is initializing. And as you can see from this screen, all three operating systems are selected. If you changed your mind at this point, you could uncheck one of these and it wouldn't install. But I'm just going to go ahead and hit install. If you want to check out the other way of installing with Pin OS, have a look at some of my other videos. It also works really well. So hit install. You need an internet connection for this. If you haven't got an Ethernet cable, then you're going to need to set up the Wi-Fi, but I've got Ethernet plugged in. So hit install and yes. And let it download all three of those operating systems and sort out all the partitioning. And you can see it gives you, like Pin OS does normally, it tells you about each operating system it's installing. So we'll come back when that's all done. Okay, so that's all done. It does say install with errors. See debug log for details, but we'll ignore that. And it's missed off Arch Linux for some reason. So we can choose what to boot first from here. You can see Ubuntu Mate is picked as first. If I pick Raspberry Pi OS and hit up, then that's what's going to boot first. So let's try that and boot. And it boots up as normal. So this is Raspberry Pi OS Buster. This is the version without a desktop interface. I've just run NeoFetch just to show you that it's up and running. So let's hit reboot. And if I press and hold shift, that goes into a recovery menu. So it means that it won't automatically boot the selected operating system. And you can see here the recovery menu gives you the option of starting again, so that would basically wipe everything off and start again. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to exit and I'm going to boot into Ubuntu Mate. So let's select that and hit up and then hit boot. Whichever one's at the top will always automatically default boot, so you don't have to be there when it's rebooting. It will always reboot into that operating system unless you press shift. So let's hit boot. And here you can see it's all booted up, and it takes you through the first time setup. I've already done some of that, but let's close this bit down. On the left hand side you can see all the drives. So if we wanted access to Raspberry Pi OS Buster, if we wanted to overclock it, we can double click on that, and we can look for the config.txt, which is here, and then we could have a play around in there, and we could overclock or change anything about resolution or anything like that for that individual operating system. It works differently to Berryboot. Berryboot has one selection to overclock and do various things. Pinn OS keeps everything separate. No one is better or worse, it just depends what you're doing with the system. So here you can see ARM frequency equals 800 is checked out, but I could enable that, I could apply an overclock, and we could run it faster. And I'd expect this method to work with pretty much any other device. As I mentioned before, maybe you were going to set it up with an Android phone or an iPhone. If you check out my other videos, you'll pretty much get the idea of how to do it from there, because you are just unzipping and copying files over to your storage device. So as long as it's formatted as FAT32, that's pretty much all you need. Anyway, I hope all this helps. Thanks very much for watching. Please like and subscribe.